Among the most notorious independent film producers in Hollywood today is Avi Lerner. The founder of Millennium Media, his career has taken several turns with some successes and flops, but he has recently fallen into a lot of trouble for his actions and his company has become less prolific. So how did he become involved in the film business and what happened? Avi Lerner began his film career in exhibition, first in South Africa, and then he opened the first drive-in theaters in Israel. He also co-founded a successful video distribution company there. Lerner would then enter film production, receiving his first producing credit on the Israeli-American co-production The Last Winter. He was then hired by the Cannon Group and handled a lot of their movies being filmed in or near South Africa. This included the Alan Quatermain movies starring Richard Chamberlain, which were filmed back-to-back. After Cannon closed their South African operations, Lerner moved to Los Angeles and decided to start his own production company, taking what he learned from his time at Cannon. He founded New Image in 1992, which specialized in direct-to-video B-movies. One philosophy he had was pre-selling the foreign and distribution rights, allowing him to quickly make back the production costs. These ranged from action films to erotic thrillers to creature features, with the hopes that their titles and covers could entice someone walking through Blockbuster or Family Video. They had titles like Cyborg Cop, Lethal Ninja, Cyborg Cop 2, Terminator Woman, Cyborg Cop 3, and Freefall. The critical reception of these movies was not particularly strong, but Lerner was a smart enough businessman that he was often able to turn a profit. However, he had bigger ambitions to enter the blockbuster space, and so he founded Millennium Films to make bigger budget and higher profile films. However, it took a number of years for Millennium to produce films that received attention. The Grey Zone, a Holocaust drama directed by Tim Blake Nelson, was one notable production that was not typical of the sorts of films associated with Millennium. Eventually, Lerner did partner with major studios to help release the films he produced. 16 Blocks, an action movie directed by Richard Donner and starring Bruce Willis, was released through Warner Brothers. Avi Lerner was also producer on Brian De Palma's historical film noir The Black Dahlia, which was distributed by Universal, and acquired the rights to produce a remake of The Wicker Man, starring Nicolas Cage, and eventually released by Warner. In 2007, Lerner would acquire a 52% stake in the independent film company First Look Studios, which gave him access to their distribution operations. And when First Look filed for bankruptcy a few years later, Millennium would acquire the remaining assets, including their library. Lerner made several other notable deals with big names around Hollywood. He produced 2 movies starring Al Pacino, Writer's Kill, and 88 Minutes, the latter of which was picked up for distribution by Sony in a number of markets, although both movies are considered among the lowest in Pacino's filmography. Lerner also picked up the rights to produce a remake of George A. Romero's zombie movie Day of the Dead, and Millennium produced the comedy Mad Money, the first movie released by the short-lived indie distributor Overture Films. One of Avi Lerner's most notable partnerships was with Sylvester Stallone. For years, he'd rejected the idea of reprising his role as John Rambo in a 4th movie. Following Miramax's failed attempt to produce a sequel, they sold the rights to Avi Lerner, who was able to convince Stallone to not only come back to play the role again, but even direct the movie. He also became a producer on a few more movies starring Nicolas Cage, like Werner Herzog's Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call New Orleans, the 3D action movie Drive Angry, and Joel Schumacher's final film Trespass. Meanwhile, Millennium would sign a multi-year First Look distribution agreement with Lionsgate. A major success Avi Lerner had was The Expendables, which united several action stars with Stallone directing. The combination of names like Stallone, Jason Statham, Bruce Willis, and Arnold Schwarzenegger in a movie together was enough to get a lot of moviegoers interested and launch a franchise. Lerner would acquire the rights to Conan the Barbarian and hoped to start a franchise for that too, with Jason Momoa playing the lead role in a new movie. However, the film underperformed and no sequels were ever made. He would get another action franchise going with Olympus Has Fallen, racing to get the movie finished and released before Sony's own White House set action movie White House Down. It did very well, and 2 sequels have been made. Lerner did branch out and try to get other sorts of movies made, buying the scripts to the Lee Daniels directed drama The Paperboy and the comedy The Big Wedding. Meanwhile, he would acquire the rights to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise and produce a few films about Leatherface and his famous chainsaw, and saw a major hit with the action comedy The Hitman's Bodyguard, starring Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson. Even if not every film hit, Avi Lerner knew how to handle the budgets and distribution deals in such a way that he would still be protected if a movie underperformed or flopped at the box office. However, a series of negative headlines would start to make waves around 2017. First, Millennium was sued for promoting a demeaning and misogynistic work culture several months before the start of the Me Too movement. The lawsuit claimed that female employees were subjected to harassment and inappropriate comments, and accused Lerner of giving women he slept with preferential treatment and producing roles on the movies. Lerner himself would deny all of this, and the suit would be settled the following year. Then, after Terry Crews revealed he'd been sexually assaulted by talent agent Adam Vennet, Crews said that Lerner called him and told him that if he had not dropped the suit, he would be fired from the next Expendables movie. Lerner denied this, but Crews decided he would not have any more involvement with the Expendables franchise or any other movie he produced. Another issue arose with Red Sonja. Lerner had gotten the rights to the character when he acquired Conan the Barbarian, and Simon West was initially hired to direct. Then in 2018, it was announced that Bryan Singer would direct the film. When the stories about his inappropriate behavior towards underage boys were revealed, a statement was released with Lerner standing behind Singer. The public backlash was immense, with Lerner later saying he let the statement be published without him reading it first, which is odd behavior for an executive being questioned about a hire like this. Even though he said he would still let Singer direct Red Sonja, he was eventually dropped from the film shortly after this. Even with these news stories, Avi Lerner tried to press on. He got the rights to make a new Hellboy movie, albeit without Guillermo del Toro and Ron Perlman, much to the disappointment of many fans. Neil Marshall would direct the movie, but he has since talked about how much he hated working on it. He said that he disliked the script, and while he did his best to improve it, he was given extremely little creative control and constantly had the movie taken in directions he disapproved of, ultimately disowning the finished film. After several years in development, another Rambo movie titled Last Blood was released in 2019 and became the lowest grossing film of the franchise. The Hitman's Bodyguard sequel, titled Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, was released while the pandemic was still affecting the theatrical business, and while the director mentioned plans for a possible sequel at the time, it's been quiet on that front for a while. When The Expendables 4 hit screens 9 years after the last one, it was clear interest had dropped considerably, as it made much less than any of the previous films. Lerner would give Hellboy another shot with a reboot titled The Crooked Man, which had a lot of involvement from the character's creator, Mike Mignola, and cost considerably less than the previous film. The movie was quietly released direct to VOD, and while the plan was to produce more Hellboy movies, it's uncertain at the moment if they will happen. Red Sonja did eventually hit screens a few months ago with MJ Bassett directing. However, I don't blame you for not being aware of that, as it was released with extremely little fanfare, playing in theaters for one day before heading to video on demand. Avi Lerner's last production to probably get any sort of major attention from audiences was Olympus Has Fallen back in 2019. And while there has been talk about a potential new movie in that series, that's been affected by Gerard Butler suing Millennium over him not getting his agreed upon profits from the first movie, among other factors. And recently, the Writers Guild of America told its members to not work with Millennium, saying they were not paying screenwriters on time. So that could certainly affect some of the projects Avi Lerner is trying to get off the ground, including a planned Rambo prequel. Looking over his career, it's certainly impressive how he's been able to make a name for himself, both for smaller scale B movies and the bigger budget action movies with stars like Stallone and Cage. However, all the troubles that came with him owing money and other issues eventually piled up, and his producing status has waned over the past number of years. While I'm sure Lerner will keep running Millennium as long as he possibly can, I don't think his name carries the sway it once had. See you next time.